Have you been wondering what you can do to take good care of your brain and help it age well? Stay tuned. I often get asked, what can I do to keep my brain healthy? Well, there are some real basic, standard kinds of things. You need to eat right, you need to exercise, you need to stay hydrated, and you really need to practice good sleep hygiene. Sleep is critical. But there are also a number of behavioral things that we can do to keep our brain healthy. I am going to share with you my personal top three brain hacks, things that I try to practice for myself to keep my brain healthy as I age, as I try to navigate things just in the season of my life. So, number one, the first thing is a dopamine reset. Dopamine, I have another video on this, but we have way more access to our own dopamine system than we ever have in history. Dopamine was really helpful in times of scarcity where you needed to be motivated to walk 2 miles to get water from a river and carry it back. And that dopamine allowed us to be motivated for things in scarcity. Now we have dopamine available to us 24/7. As soon as I wake up in the morning, I can check my phone and get a little bit of dopamine, or turn on some music and get a little bit of dopamine. Or I come downstairs and I can have a Danish and a cup of coffee, and I'm going to get more dopamine. And I can go throughout my day feeding myself little bits of dopamine. But as I break down in the other video on dopamine, what happens is every time I give myself a little hit of dopamine, my brain is moving what we call the hedonic set point, meaning it's going to take more and more and more to give me just a little bit of dopamine each time I get a dopamine hit. Well, that is not very good for your brain in the long run. So, the only way to fix it is with a dopamine reset. And the way that you do that is you pick your biggest dopamine rushes of the day, whether it's scrolling on TikTok or Netflixing in the evening, whatever it is that you do that's giving you large amounts of dopamine, isolate that and try to eliminate it for 30 days. That, if you remove dopamine, and let me warn you, it's going to hurt. It will hurt for probably about the first 2 weeks because your brain is going through a withdrawal. But if you do it, it will actually really help reset and restore some homeostasis in the brain. Number two is allow yourself to daydream. When we daydream, we go to a place in our brain called the default network. Now, the default network involves several structures in the brain, and it basically is what the part of the network that takes over, or the network, I should say, is the part of the brain that takes over when we are daydreaming. When we allow ourselves to daydream, it allows our executive function to rest, that executive part of our brain. The default network kind of takes over. And what we find is people that allow themselves that time to daydream do have better brain function. And as a result, they are more creative and they're better problem solvers. Now, sometimes for some people, this creates a feeling of boredom. And if you can tolerate the boredom, I would encourage you to. And as you tolerate it, just remind yourself that it's good for your brain. You're letting your brain rest. We do not need to be overstimulated all the hours in which we are awake. It is really not good for our brains. So you allow yourself to daydream. Now, I will say if you get bored and the boredom creates anxiety, then this hack, you might not be ready for it. You might want to process your anxiety with a counselor or talk to somebody, a professional about it first if you find that the boredom makes you anxious. But if you can tolerate the boredom, if you get bored, you might not. If I can daydream all day and not get bored. But the daydreaming allows that default network to come online and allows the executive function to rest. And all of that gives our brain a reset. And that's going to bring me to the number three brain hack that I have for you today. And that is to practice the spiritual disciplines. I probably sound like a nagging mom at this point. You got to pray and you got to meditate. But I'm telling you, it's one of the best things you can do for your brain. When you pray, when you meditate on God's word, you are increasing the blood flow to the prefrontal cortex. Okay. So it's going to quiet that limbic system where fight and flight responses are and anxiety, depression, all of that, the survival mechanisms are back there. It's going to quiet that and it's going to allow that prefrontal cortex where empathy and compassion and altruism and higher order reasoning and thinking before you act, all of that is in that prefrontal cortex. So it's going to increase blood flow to that part of the brain. And over time, what that does is it increases more gray matter. So you're going to have this well-developed frontal lobe that's going to allow you to show up the way you really actually do want to show up for people: kind, caring, patient, emotionally regulated, not overreactive, etc. The other thing that that's going to do when you engage in those spiritual disciplines, as it nourishes that prefrontal cortex, is it's going to lower your cortisol. And as a result of lowering your cortisol, your immune function is going to improve. You reduce your risk for almost all forms of disease, particularly heart disease and endocrine dysfunction. And there is some really good research that you also reduce your risk of mental illness and dementia. I hope these brain hacks have been helpful for you today. Love to hear what you think. And until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you.